Okay, so we're officially on. I'm Emily Sweeney. I'm with the Boston Globe, and I'm here with Luke O'Neill. And I want to thank the New England chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists for putting this together for us. Luke, you've written for so many different publications. Where can I begin?
Boston Globe.
The Boston Globe, of course, the best.
Infamously.
And then some other little publications like New York Magazine, the New York Times Magazine, Washington Post, The Atlantic, Playboy, Slate, and Vice. You know.
Yeah.
So
I got
yeah,
it. That's just what happens when you get old. You just accumulate bylines.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with me being talented or anything.
You're right. Okay. Well,
wait. I'm in my wife's third grade remote teaching class. So if anyone's noticing the third grade stuff on the wall, that's what's going on here. We have
okay.
it's a lovely festive room, and I'm not the 3 balloon in the background. I don't usually just have that hanging around. There's a reason for that.
Nice. I wasn't sure if that, like, the drawings behind you were like your next book cover. So. So now your latest book is called Lockdown in Hell World. I don't know if you can maybe talk a little about that, how it came to be. I mean, obviously, as a writer,
it's based on my newsletter, Welcome to Hell World, and it's actually the second book that I've done based on the newsletter. And basically, they came out almost a year after each other, which is kind of really stupid. I think to put out 2 books based on a newsletter within a year. But the last one was great, and people seemed to really like it, and my publisher loved it, and so they kind of once the pandemic was kicking off, they asked me if I wanted to sort of document what it was going to be like to live through this year, and I kind of understand that people maybe don't want to relive it already so soon because it's not even over yet, but I kind of liked the idea of having this sort of week by week document of what it was actually like to live through this whole thing. And also I thought it was an interesting challenge because, obviously, as you know, as a reporter, a huge part of what you do is you go someplace and you look at something, and that's how you do reporting. But the idea that we couldn't really go anywhere without risking our health, or you have to really weigh in the balance whether or not it was worth leaving the house for this story or that story. I found that to be kind of a unique challenge, and I tried to sort of do my best reporting without having to leave the house, and aside from during the summer for a bunch of the marches and protests and everything, when I went to Boston a bunch, and but for the most part, what we got some weird volume going on here.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, everybody that's tuning in, make sure you have it on mute, please. Thank you. So, and again, I didn't mean to cut you off, Luke, but
oh no, that's fine. I was talking for too long.
No, I want to ask you, if you could talk about your newsletter too, obviously, because we have an audience of writers here, and a lot of people are going to be watching this on YouTube afterward. And I've always been intrigued by your newsletter. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and how successful? I mean, I know you've done really well with it.
It's, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Substack, the platform that I use for my newsletter, has become a little bit controversial lately with some of the people that they've been recruiting to the platform. But, for the past 2 years, I've been using it. It's been brilliant, and I've really loved it. And, as someone, as you mentioned, who's freelance for all these places over the years, it's been really great to just be able to write whatever I want without having to go through all of the hoops that you have to do as a freelancer. And that, there's like I recognized like a few years ago that places you freelance for don't really care about you. It's and this, my whole thing with the Boston Globe aside, this like it's like across the board, and the act of being a freelancer is basically asking, it's like reapplying for a job every single day, and you come up with an idea and you ask somebody, you're like, please sir, can I make some money off this idea, and then you wait and you wait, and then they say no or they say yes, and then you wait for it to come out. Who knows when it's going to come out, and who knows when you're going to get paid. And so the concept of the newsletter was just, I can do whatever I want on my own schedule, and the money, people can pay me money if they want to read it to support me, and I've been very lucky that a lot of people have. And it's it's I don't want to go back. I don't like I don't care about, I don't know, maybe it's a product of having done this for so long, but like I don't really care about the prestige of writing for this or that place anymore. I just want to write. I'd rather write for a smaller audience. Like if I write for my newsletter, I've got, at this point it's almost like 20,000 subscribers, which is pretty good. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but I mean it's like you just send an email to 20,000 people and they'll read it. That seems like a lot of people. Obviously not compared to, the Globe or Washington Post or whatever. But the benefit there is that I can do it on my own terms, and I don't have to convince management that this is a good idea that's going to get, scale and get enough eyeballs, so you can do weird stories that you wouldn't be allowed to do writing for a newspaper or a magazine. And sometimes they flop. I've done a few, more than my share of newsletter pieces that kind of sucked, and that's like the product of not having an editor, but that has its like pros and cons too. Like an editor, obviously a good editor is going to make your story better, but they're also going to say no a lot to ideas that you're really excited about. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
Yeah. I mean, that, it's working with editors, it's always a different experience. Every edit is different, as you know. And one thing about your writing, I've always thought it was great, like how bold your style is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered, writer to writer, how the hell did you manage to pull it off? Like, you know what I mean? Your book is like, it's written in your style, the whole way through. And did you ever hit up against like editors, like saying to change things or change your tone or?
No, I was really lucky with Or Books, who published the two Hell World books, because they liked what I was doing. And when we were talking, I was like, well, I don't want to do a book. Writing a book is so stupid. It's like the stupidest, and as you know, like the whole process, you basically have to work for like 6 months for free to do the job application to have a book published. You have to the proposal and everything. You have to write like, I don't know, a quarter of the book to eat, and then present it to a publisher. Like, here's what I've done. And for the vast majority of people, they're going to say, no, we don't want it. Or actually even more than that, they're not even going to respond to you. You're just going to send it off into nowhere. And so when this, very well-established and respectable indie leftist publisher came to me, it was like, we want to let you do what you do, and we won't change it that much. It's like, that's kind of like winning the lottery in terms of being a writer. But then there's a trade-off, because it's a smaller press, so it's not like I'm getting like $100,000 advance or whatever, not that many people get that. Although I just saw Mike Pence got like $3 million advance just now from Simon and Schuster for his books. So
not bad.
Yeah, maybe I should looking to becoming more of a fascist piece of shit. There's good money in that. There's good money in that on Substack too now. They basically were like, well, I'll let you do what you want. And, for somebody who's like sort of, is self-indulgent like me, that's like the magic words. It's like, okay, I'll do that. I'll do my own thing. And I feel really fortunate,
Oh, no, that's great. I mean, did you ever in your magazine writing bump up against editors like really wanting to change things and change your writing? You don't
Yeah,
have to share particular stories, but you can if you want.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just like noticing that this is the first time I ever used one of these lights, and it's like giving me like the glow on my head. I should have got powder beforehand. I'm totally not professional.
You look great. Don't worry.
Yeah, as we said, I've kind of been around the block and in a lot of different magazines and stuff. And again, editors will make your writing better, but what they will do is, like, I don't think we talk about this enough. Like, everyone knows that movie studios constrain the creativity of directors. Everyone knows that record labels constrain the creativity of bands, and they try to force you into this lane that is going to be more marketable and more within the bounds of what is acceptable and what is sold before. But I don't think people ever really talk about that. Like, magazine editors and newspaper editors do that too, and they're just as averse to experimentation as this. It's such a stereotype, right? Like, the Hollywood producers, like, no, you've got to make this, like Avengers or whatever, so we can make money. And I think that editors, even though the level of money we're talking about is a lot different, the scale of the money to be made is a lot different. I think that editors do that too. And they want, like, every time I've written a long form magazine piece for a respectable magazine, even ones I like I've had great experiences with Boston Magazine and great editors there. And some of my pieces in my book were originally published in Boston Magazine, and they did a great job. I don't mean to single them out, but they want you to do the structure of a long form piece, that every single one is, you open with your scene, that really sets up what's going on. And then you step back in the second part, and there's your data, here's where you actually did the reporting. And then, there's a bit that tells you all why it's important. And then you round it out with a kicker that, references back to the first scene, and like, and this is like a journalist type of endeavor podcast or whatever we're dealing with here. So you all know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you do too, right? But why? Why do they do that? Like, who cares? Like, are people? I think they're just too afraid to deviate from that tradition. And my what I propose is that shit's can be good, but it can also be good to not do that. And so that's why I've really tried to fuck around with the parameters of what journalism is in both of my books and in the newsletter, and almost sort of smuggle journalism into like experimental literary type of writing, for lack of a better term that makes it sound more profound or fancy than it is. But and more of it is just like having been burnt out by so many years in the digital publishing and traditional publishing industries, and just being like, I don't want to do that shit anymore.
Understandable. Yeah, journalism smuggling sounds much more interesting. So for a lot of folks, you have had a very successful career as a freelancer. Is there any like tips or advice you could give people, that are tuning in and watching this, like writers that want to break into like major magazines, like, say like, Playboy or the New York Times Magazine?
I think that it doesn't really matter how much. I think that younger writers now are obsessed with whether they have clips from here or there, whether they have this pedigree, whether or not, they've, sufficiently climbed the ladder or whatever, but it really doesn't matter. All that matters is the idea and the story. And if you come to an editor and you're like, obviously kind of a green, newer journalist, but you have like a killer story idea, they're not gonna, unless it's like the New Yorker or something, they're gonna want the idea. And like, I think editors are more interested in the idea for a story than the person. They are interested in the person who's, presenting it to them, but that's secondary to the idea. So like the primary thing is to come up with the idea for the story. And I don't know, would you agree with that? Like, it doesn't really necessarily matter. You don't have to have like a fancy resume. If you're like, oh, I found out that this, I think like one thing people don't understand is like a lot of writers who don't live in New York or DC or even Boston or wherever, like all of the rest of the country, like most of the traditional publishing industry doesn't pay attention to it and has no idea what's going on. I almost think that in a way, if you live in the middle of the country or the South or whatever, you almost have a leg up and you don't even know it because everyone is in New York and they're not paying attention to where you're living. So I feel like that's like a thing that a lot of people don't think. Like if you're pitching to a national publication, is that something that may seem obvious to you because you live there, like here in Boston or New York, you have no idea what's going on in other states. It tends to be very sort of myopic, the news media. So I would say like people don't even realize that they have like a wealth of potential stories right in their backyard that they should be pitching to places in New York, because like a story that's going on in New York or a story that's going on in DC, there are 5,000 journalists already covering it. But if you live in wherever the fuck, like nobody knows.
That's a
So
really good point.
yeah, so I think like the story itself is more important than whether or not you think you're important enough to be pitching a place. And keep in mind that not living in New York or DC can be a benefit to you. And, I think people think of that as the opposite all the time.
I would also say, and tell me if you disagree, to go for it. And if you do have a good idea, pitch national publications. Before getting to the Globe, I pitched to a couple magazines and, got articles published. And I was kind of at the time shocked. I was like, wow, like,
Right.
they actually, you can get published. You don't necessarily have to work there or even, know somebody personally there. If you, email the right editor, a decent idea.
And also like getting rejected, it's not that big of a deal, like it seems like it's going to be the worst thing in the world. Like I remember, it's still, well, now if somebody rejected a story, you might be like, fuck you, you don't know. But when you're younger, you think like, oh well, I suck, that's it. My career's over, I got a rejection and I'm mortified, and that editor is going to go immediately tell everyone that they know that I suck. But it's not like that at all. It's just like, no, this doesn't work, try again next time, and it's really hard to balance your confidence, and I don't know. Are we talking to younger people right now? Is that the premise of this, or?
It's a total mix. We have student journalists who are tuning in, and then we also have like veteran journalists who, you know what I mean,
Right.
been around the block. So it's a mix.
So we have a mix of people who think that I'm smart and wise, and a mix of people who think that I'm a shithead and don't know what I'm talking about. That's fine. But just being said no to sucks, but like in order to do this job, you have to have a real, like, I don't know, it's like a cliche, like in football, it's a cliche, or baseball, I think too. It's like if you're a cornerback and they score a touchdown on you, you're supposed to have a real short memory. You're supposed to go out on the next play and forget that you just got scored on. because it's resetting, it's a new play. And that's similar thing with journalism. Like if you get rejected or you don't get a response, it's like, okay, well, you take an hour or two to be like, to lick your wounds, and then you have to be like, okay, time to come up with something else,
Yeah. I mean, and I remember when I was like pitching some magazines, it was like many, many years ago. And if I got a rejection from an editor, in a way I was kind of psyched. I was like, wow, they responded.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Right. When I
they
first,
know who I am.
right.
I have their right email address. Like, and usually they were pretty positive, like, hey, hit us up with another story idea. And sometimes I would, and, it would work out. So,
Well, I know
sometimes.
any editors who may be watching this later, like just saying no is like the kindest thing you can do, as opposed to like never responding. You're just like, oh, sorry, this doesn't work for us. And then you go, boom, okay. Because a lot of times you are going to the place you want to go to first, and you kind of suspect they're going to say no, and then you're going to go to the place you want next, and you just want to be released from that, like if you pitch a story to the New York Times and you're not like a very well established writer or something, they're probably going to say no or just ignore it, but you're going to wait a few days to see if they say no. You know what I mean?
No,
And
totally.
so, I mean, I know editors are very busy. Editors love to talk about how busy they are all the time. Oh, the poor editors.
They get so many emails.
Yeah, with their salaries and their health benefits. And meanwhile, there's all these like miserable beggar freelancers out here that are like, we're like asking for scraps of bread. I don't know. Yeah, please. Yeah, please. May I write a story?
I've always been impressed by your social media presence, Luke, and obviously your newsletter is doing extremely well. Do you have any advice or like tips on like how did you build such a large audience like on your own?
Like being a complete shithead all the time.
Okay.
No, I mean, sadly, that is kind of true. Like, in order to get a larger social media audience, you can't, like, if somebody's just like a nice person, like, here's what I think, this is nice, I like this is nice, like, nobody's going to pay attention. And, I kind of spent a lot of years purposefully being, kind of a antagonistic shithead to people. And, for better or worse, that gets a lot of attention. I'm actually like really trying to turn the corner on that and get away from that sort of thing now. But like, I don't know. It's just that building a following on Twitter is really stupidly important, I think, for if you're a freelancer, because like editors literally will look you up and be like, oh, they have 200 followers. But if you've got 20,000 or 50,000, whatever, they're going to be more likely to want to commission a piece from you. And I think that's shitty, but that's just like the sad reality of how it is. How the newsletter got so many so many followers, I don't know. I about 2.5 years ago, after all my frustration with being in the freelance industry for so long, I just decided, okay, I'm going to really try to make this good. I'm going to like really spend all my time on this and make this my job. And it worked out for me. And that's not like a given. Obviously, lots of people work much harder than me and it doesn't work out, but just like a combination of luck and timing and coming up with a concept that wasn't really being done too much, trying to figure out a way to make your stuff stand out. I wouldn't recommend, like, if you were going to start a newsletter, just like trying to copy somebody else's thing. I would recommend like either sinking or swimming on your own thing,
Well, that makes sense, for sure. We're winding down. If anybody has any questions in the audience, you can put them in the chat and we can grab them.
Nobody be.
Also, and now, what's the best way to buy your book, Luke, and subscribe to your newsletter? And
so the newsletter is luke.substack.com, and you can buy the books at don't buy them through Amazon. If you can, buy them directly through the publisher at orbooks.com. And, or you can just probably Google Welcome to Hell World and all that stuff will come up. But yeah, and it's I don't know, if you're gonna do one or the other, subscribe to the newsletter because I get more money that way. The book.
Hey, there you go.
Did you get a lot of money on what was on your book? Did you make any money from sales, or was it?
No, Joe's coming tomorrow.
What's that?
What?
Somebody.
I don't know. I'm still hoping for the day that I get Zoom bombed somehow. Like,
Yeah, well, I'm surprised it didn't happen.
Hoping.
Yeah, because like royalty rates are so shitty for most publishing deals. So
Yeah, I mean, the book publishing world has changed so much. Like, I know my ex-wife actually. She wrote a book years and years ago. She got like a $70,000 advance. I mean, that's like unheard of these days. You know what I mean? Like, it's very rare. But
unless you're some like celebrity or whatever, or like
yeah. So for my books, it was much more. They were smaller press. Like, my second book was Roman and Littlefield. I got an advance of got a small advance and then royalties. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the point is, don't expect to make a lot of money off books, folks.
No, it's like a long-term revenue stream. You know what I mean? Some, every couple times a year, I'll get like a check in the mail.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, but it's not paying the mortgage. You know what I mean?
What was your last one? Dropkick Murphy?
That hasn't come out yet.
Oh,
actually, we're still shopping that around. But hopefully,
the person, not the band.
The first Boston Organized Crime was the first one, and then Gangland Boston.
I mean, the Dropkick Murphy, the person, not the band.
Oh yeah, and then I wrote a biography of Dropkick Murphy, the guy who the band's named after, who was a professional wrestler back in the day, like Great Depression, and then he opened like a rehab center for alcoholics.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So it's a wild story, and I'm hoping it'll be published very soon. So
that's awesome.
Well, thank you for letting me plug my books.
Yeah, well, of course. I think more than anything else, like it's more. I don't know. I think we all get so like individualized in being freelance writers and authors, whatever. And I think I appreciate you doing this for me. I think it's important for us to all lift each other up, especially Boston folks. I always appreciate. I love hearing your accent. It really makes me feel like I'm at home. I haven't. Awesome. We moved to the suburbs just as as the book is about, just as the pandemic started, and I haven't heard a real good Boston accent in a while. So
yeah, I still drop my ahs now and again. So
sounds like music to me.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Luke, and to everybody that tuned in. If you could follow SPJ New England on Twitter. The Twitter handle's SPJ_New England. But they're the ones that put this together, and we'll be putting it online. The episode will be on YouTube, and we'll be spreading the word on social media. So, again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Luke. It's good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for watching. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, take care, guys.